Hi everyone, it's Andy Chapman here from Cresco Communications. This is the second in our 5-part series on how to get more from your email marketing. Today we're going to be talking about subject lines and the importance of keeping them short and relevant. Just a couple of things we need to consider before we actually write the subject line are who are we sending it to, how are you splitting up your list, and also is there any current news or events that might affect that particular group. So segmentation or splitting up your list is something we're going to discuss more in the 4th video of this series on segmentation and how to make more money from your email marketing. If you're splitting up your list by age, gender, location, needs, wants, requirements, then it's good to know or good to consider those particular fields when actually writing the subject line, so you can make that subject line as relevant to that group of people as possible. Also, try and consider any current events, news or affairs that might affect that particular group. For instance, if there's a major sports event going on, or if there's going to be any major changes in the weather, can you use those news or events to your advantage? So it's always worth considering that before you actually write the subject line. So the first thing we need to do is test. You can do this by using a subject line selecting tool, which most ESPs or email service providers offer now, or speak to your agency. What this does is will give you the option of sending 2 or 3 subject lines to a small portion of your database or to that group that you're sending to. You can then gauge the response or the open rate from those 2 that you've sent out, and whichever one wins, essentially, or gets a better score, you can then use across your entire group or database. The advantage to this is what you might think is working, or what you might think is good for that group might not actually be the best. So it's always worth thinking outside the box, being a little bit more creative and testing before you send. Okay, so my next point is that it needs to be short and relevant. Most email providers' preview pane will allow for 55 characters. If you're testing sufficiently, as I said in the last point, you should know how many people from your group or from your list are opening on a mobile phone, as this can reduce the character allowance. It doesn't necessarily mean that the subject line has to only be 55 characters long, but it means that that's what they're going to initially see, and that's where the decision-making process is. So you need to offer as much information about your company and about the content of the email within that 55 characters. And you have to be confident that the content of the email is going to want to be opened. Once you've understood that, try and make sure that it's obvious the company that it's been sent from, and particularly now even more the person that's sending it. Try not to give too much away within that 55 characters. Try and leave an air of curiosity so that people still want to open the email. Once they've opened the email, that's when you need to have a strong call to action within the top fold or the upper pane of the email to take people through to your website. So at that point, just make it as short and as relevant as possible. Leave an air of curiosity. Okay, so my next point is to create a favourites list within the subject line. This works really well across social media as well as email marketing, and it's a particular favourite of mine. What I mean by this is to offer information to your client, your customer, or your database to create a culture in the form of a list. So that subject line and the body of the email could be 5 ways to make more money through your subject lines. If I receive that, I would then want to read that email because I know that there would be 5 bullet points from which I could read with a little bit of content underneath. Alternatively, you could even have 4 and then have a call to action for the 5th. That might work for something like 6 ways to get 6-pack abs before summer, which many people would want to open. So create that favourites list because that's an informative sell. You're not trying to sell anything, you're trying to create a culture, and you're trying to bring people towards your website through information rather than through product. And it's a great way to, like I say, to build that culture around your business. Okay, so my final point on writing a positive subject line is try and consider the wording that you use. What I mean by this is try and use the word this as much as possible. So, have you seen this? Or could this help you? Is this what's missing in your business? Try and give a little bit away at the beginning of, like I said in the first point, in the first 55 characters. So it could be digital marketing, are you missing this? Or it could be email marketing, is this the next big thing? Also consider videos as well, because everybody loves to watch videos. They're a lot easier to manage than big long articles. So you don't necessarily need to embed a video into the email because that can affect deliverability. Speak to your email service provider before doing that. But consider pushing people through to your website to view a video. And again, that goes back to my previous point about informative sell. So could this video be the next big thing for your business? It's quite long, that one, but could this video help you? And if they know who it's coming from, if it's coming from the Marketer magazine, then that's going to be a trusted brand and I'd want to click through to that. So think about the wording you're using and think about pushing them through to a video onto the website. Okay, so my last 2 points are on some don'ts, some definitely do nots. The first one is consider the grammar in which you're using and the wording that you're using within your subject line. Try not to make it sound like you're shouting. Try not to overuse capital letters, question marks, or don't even use exclamation marks in a subject line. Try and make it as short, relevant, and relatively informal as possible. Try not to use the word newsletter, for instance, as that's a kind of turn off to most people when opening an email. Try and make it relevant to the content of the email, relevant to the time in which you're sending it, and also to the people you're sending it to. And the last thing is try and avoid using any spammy words. These are all obvious, and if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So avoid using words like cheap, cost, free. Never use free in the body of the email or in the subject line. And then Rolex or Viagra. Definitely don't ever use them because they won't get anywhere and that could affect your deliverability. Okay, thanks very much for your time. If you'd like more information on this or you'd like to see more of our videos, go to our website, which is www.crescocommunications.com. Our next video is going to be on content marketing and that should be out next week, so watch your space.